Sarah, I have one very important question to ask you as we kick off this episode. How is it May already in 2025? How is it this far through the year? Feels like we blinked and already we're almost into the second half of 2025. This is ridiculous.
I know. I'm constantly aware of onrushing deadlines, which I'm failing to meet. And for long-term projects, which I think, I've got ages for, and then haven't got any time at all. And also, I just can't believe theatrically that we're so far through the year, and that so many of the things that I was really excited about seeing in January, which seemed a long way away, are now coming up. And also, there seems equally to be a rush of announcements of things to look forward to later in the year. And there is just this sense of time passing, but in very nice ways, I guess.
I've often observed as an arts journalist, you kind of live 2 to 3 months in the future sometimes. So you announce a show in May that's going to open in August, and you're thinking about, what am I going to do in August for this show? How am I going to cover it? Who am I going to interview? Who am I going to send to press night? That by the time it actually rolls around, you think, I'm already now thinking about December, even though it's now August. So you never actually live in the moment, which is quite a sad thing sometimes when you're overseeing a platform like WhatsOnStage. So we thought actually, at least one thing I'll say, if I'm getting slightly sentimental, is that the podcast just gives us a window to sit back and sit in the present moment and think about what's going on rather than thinking too far into the future. But in terms of what's going on, like you say, it has been non-stop these last few weeks in terms of like every single announcement under the sun. Obviously, we had the National Theatre's incredible new season, which Indu Rubisingen laid out for us last week, and you can go back to listen to that on our previous podcast. But even since then, it's been non-stop. I think this morning there was a new production of A Lady from the Sea with Alicia Vikander and Andrew Lincoln, directed by Simon Stone, which was announced for the Bridge Theatre, which I'm sure is going to be one of the big tentpole shows for the winter, and actually caps off an incredible year of programming for the Bridge. It's sort of like non-stop, star after star, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice, I think, for Nicholas Heitner to have got his theatre back, because obviously the incredible success of Guys and Dolls just took it out of commission for such a long time. I think we should say hello before we go any further, and then I'll tell you my thoughts about Lady from the Sea. So, hello, it's a welcome to this week's episode of the WhatsOnStage podcast with me, Sarah Crompton.
And me, Alex Wood.
And I am very, very excited about Lady from the Sea. I think I had a psychic wave, actually, because I was thinking how rarely it's done and how I would like to see it. I did see Natasha Richardson do it, which is a famous production and was really memorable. I don't feel I've seen it much since then. So it's brilliant that it's coming on. And it does rather bring together a year of Ibsen. He's suddenly on everybody's lips all the time. I keep writing that introduction, so I have to find a new way into writing about Ibsen. But after Ghosts at the Lyric, which was a big rethinking and making it very contemporary, we've also had, in my opinion, slightly less successful Master Builder, which was my Master Builder, and sort of rewritten from a feminist viewpoint. And Lady from the Sea, fascinating play, tricky, evocative, sad, interesting.
I saw it at the Donmar Warehouse in 2017. I think it was Nikki Amuka Bird did a production there, and it's pretty solid. I thought that the bones were all correct. I wasn't sure it was the production that would stay with me forever. So Simon Stone is often a visionary when it comes to taking the classics and pulling them in directions you'd never expect, as was obviously the case with his landmark production of Yerma with Billy Piper, which I assume people will be talking about for decades and centuries to come. So Lord knows what he'll be doing at the Bridge, which is an incredibly versatile space. And it's one of the shows that will be making the rest of 2025 a very appetising offering. And we thought for this episode of the WhatsOnStage podcast, we will list some of the shows we're most excited to see over the summer, sort of like consolidate some of our excitement into a well-organised list, as well as a few honourable mentions as well.
I do have the sense at the moment of just running like a hamster on a wheel from one thing to the next. So when I actually paused and thought, let's look at what's coming up and let's decide what I'm excited about, I realised there are so many things that I'm excited about, and there are so many, many things going on. I can't wait to see. And I think there used to be a slight sense that summer was a time where not much happened in theatre, whereas now every 3-month interval feels that it offers its own riches and own excitements. And of course I am, and I've said this before, so I'll say it again, incredibly excited by the arrival from New York of Stereophonic, which I always felt like I'd discovered, though, you know, obviously the Tony voters discovered it too, because it became the most nominated play in Broadway history. It was nominated for 13 Tony Awards, but when I went to see it, I had one of those amazing New York days, which if you love theatre, it's always a treat, where I'd done an interview in the morning and I had to race to the matinee, and I arrived with like 5 minutes to spare, and I hadn't really read about the play. I knew that everybody was talking about it, but I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't have time to even look at the programme properly. So all I knew when I sat down was it was 3 hours long, and it was a play about a band. And the extraordinary thing about it is you walk into the theatre and the set design is a recording studio. So you immediately know that there's something going to be different about it, because there's a very narrow bit at the front of the stage and then a booth behind which is closed off by glass. So that's your immediate encounter, which I presume will be the same in London. And then over 3 hours, because it is a long play, this extraordinary story unfolds of a band making an album over a year and the way that their relationships changed during that year. But what is astonishing about it is how many things it does in terms of that. So it's about music, it's about creativity. You've got this wonderful thing of actors actually playing the music you're hearing, written by Will Butler of Arcade Fire. You've got the sense of how hard it is to make an album. So that's one thing. Then you've got just the sense of how hard it is to live your life, because it is essentially about every single human emotion. And then it adds another layer in, because it's about what you hear and what you don't hear, and what you understand and what you don't understand. So the recording studio, in a sense, becomes an image of silence and sound. And it's so rich. And I honestly sat there, it's, as I say, it is long, but there wasn't a second that I wasn't engaged by it. And I can't wait to see it in London again, because I felt it was really one of the masterpieces. And it's by David Ajimi, and I hadn't seen his work before, and he spent about a decade writing this play. And one of the things I discovered this week is that he's not particularly interested in music. So it was just an idea he had. And then he went away and researched it and thought about it. So what he's interested in is the story of creativity and the story underneath the music. But he's not like a mad music buff or anything. So I found that really riveting as well.
It's important to say that there are still tickets on sale for it from £25. So I feel as though it's going to be one of those sleeper hits over the months. I think it's currently booking until September, where as the word of mouth begins to really hype up, it will get more and more difficult to source the tickets. So take our advice, take Sarah's brilliant testimonial.
Really take my advice.
Run to the box office and get a ticket. You know, there's far worse ways to spend 3 hours, aren't there? So I haven't seen the show yet. I'm waiting for my moment at the Duke of York's, but I love that album so much. I listen to Masquerade probably at least 3 times a day.
I really do recommend people see it. I can't imagine not liking it, though. I'm sure maybe there are some people who won't. But it's also, and this makes it sound terrible, it's a bit like a soap opera. There is a kind of fascinating thing about what happens next all the time. You know, will they manage to get the album out? Will they make this song? Will the drummer throw a hissy fit? Will the bassist turn up? There is a real ongoing drama within it. So it's a bit like watching a telenovela or a soap. And I liked that quality to it as well. So and it's interesting coming now, because of course when it was on Broadway, there wasn't the album. Whereas now there is the original cast album for people to listen to before they go. And the music's fabulous.
And it's a mix of original cast from Broadway and some UK talent as well in the mix, which should then create a very different dynamic as well for you to see it in slightly different hands.
Yes, I have talked to them in a slightly different context. And I don't think it gives anything away to say that the nature of the play means the fact that new people are coming into it is quite exciting. It immediately alters the dynamic. And everybody's quite excited about that because that is in the nature of being a band and being a group of people who get together. The British cast is brilliant. And people who have been doing brilliant things like friend of the pod, Naya Tal, who's just recently been in Hamlet, and also Zachary Hart, who was in The Seagull, interestingly playing a guitar in The Seagull as well. He's staying in musical character. And Lucy Kozeski, who is also in The Seagull, and Jack Ridderford. So I think it's a terrific cast altogether. And then they're joining Andrew R. Butler and Eli Gelb, who are the sound engineers, and Chris Stack, who plays brilliant drummer, sort of peacock drummer, who has this one scene that just makes me laugh out loud every time I think about it. That's the other thing about it. It's very funny. It's quite serious, but very funny. Slice of life.
Interesting. I cannot wait. 12th of June, we'll be there on opening night. I'm sure we'll be talking about it at length before then. So this is just I think we've already spoken about it at length as well. So it's going to be stereophonic special.
What are you most looking forward to?
So we're going to stay in London. I was going to stay with a Broadway import for my first show, and also one beginning with S, and I think was playing on Broadway at the exact same time as Stereophonic. But that really is the point at which the similarities end, because my first pick is the outdoor premiere and the UK premiere of Shucked, which is penned by Robert Horn, Brandy Clark and Shane McAnally, which actually opens tomorrow in previews at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. The first time that Regent's Park has ever transferred a production from Broadway. And it's very unusual for a show to have an initial run, or a production to have an initial run inside, and then to have a completely separate run with the same creative team, but now without the fly space above, and it's just, open air. So it's quite an unusual move, but really exciting one. And for those who know the show or who love the show, will realise it's a fantastic fit, because it's all about a corn-obsessed town. Essentially, everything in their economy, in their lifestyle, is based around corn. It's in their alcohol, it's in their food, it's essentially everything that keeps them going. But when the crops start to fail, they all suddenly panic, and it's up to one intrepid townsperson to sort of essentially fly the nest and find a way to save the corn. But at the same time, there's a lot of romantic entanglements and other things going on. It's very, very funny. I'd say it's probably one of the funniest musicals that I've seen on Broadway ever, because I saw it when it was on Broadway. And just really fantastic one-liners and some incredible vocal moments that will be brought to you from cast members, including Georgina Honora, who was wonderful in Kiss Me Kate at the Barbican last summer, and she also led The Wizard of Oz when that was on at the London Palladium. And then you've got people like Ben Joyce, who is a wonderful rising star. He played Marty in Back to the Future, and before that was in Jersey Boys. So it's lovely to see him sort of originate a part in a show in the UK. All in all, it's Drew McOney's first production as part of his time as artistic director at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. And it's a really fun, irreverent show to start with. And it shows that they're thinking slightly outside of the box in terms of what productions they can stage. The fact that they can almost transplant wholesale a show from Broadway and house it on the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre stage itself is a very big move. And I think it's probably a sign to other producers that, look, we're here and we're really willing to work with you. Again, I think it's going to be a really solid word of mouth, because it's a very big comedic bonanza. That's still probably a bit of an unknown entity, because if you tell someone, go and see this musical about corn, they might be like, well, why on earth should I do that?
Yeah, I think it's another one that very much, book soon for, because I suspect it will be here. I'm gutted because I can't go to review it, because I've got sometimes very rarely I get a clash between my different worlds of theatre and dance, and this is one of those occasions. But I will definitely be booking in to see it later, because not only have you been so enthusiastic about, but the word of mouth on it is exceptional, and the Broadway reviews again whetted the appetite to go and see it. it. So I think it is a hot hit.
Yeah, and the writers of the music are sort of they cut their teeth in country music, so it's very much in that style of storytelling, but it's very irreverent and sometimes a bit meta. It also has a sort of standout 11 o'clock number called Independently Owned, which Georgina will be singing. I think that might really bring down that. Can you bring down a house when it's open air? Who knows? Bring down some trees. Yeah, bring down
bring down the rain is usually the case with the open air, but anyhow, let's hope not for that.
Yeah, so all in all, it's nothing too profound, but it's just a really, really lovely night out. And sometimes that's all you need in theatre. So, yeah. Where would you go next, Sarah, with your second pick?
Well, of course, because even though the sun's coming out, I love a gloomy play. So I'm heading off to the Almeida for Moon for the Misbegotten, which is Eugene O'Neill's final play, from 1943. He always think the awful thing about O'Neill is he lived for 10 years after that, but he had a type of Parkinson's that meant he shook too much, he couldn't write. So all the other things that he was weighing himself down with, like his alcoholism, in fact didn't stop him writing, but this neurological disease did. And so Moon for the Misbegotten really is the last play he finished, and it continues the story of Jamie, the youngest and most autobiographical Tyrone from Long Day's Journey into Night, and continues the story of Jamie's guilt and misery about his mother. It's one of those plays, it flopped, I think. It wasn't a success when it was first performed. It then has an extraordinary success, I want to say, in the 1970s when Colleen Dewhurst and Jason Robards do it. And I think it's that late, it might be the 60s. And it's rediscovered, essentially, at that point. But it's a tricky old play, because a lot of chat, like all O'Neill. And Rebecca Frecknell is going to have a look at it. So Rebecca Frecknell is definitely working her way through the American Masters. We know that she's going to have a go at Death of a Salesman at the National with Paul Mescal coming up next year. So this year she turns her attention to Eugene O'Neill, and her stars are Ruth Wilson, who I would probably watch reading a telephone book, really, and Michael Shannon, who I think is also amazing actor. So that's all really enticing. What's interesting about, just really briefly about Rebecca Frecknell, is how much differently British audiences and American audiences react to her. So I happened to be talking to an American after the Death of a Salesman was announced, and they said, Rebecca's going to have Frecknell's going to have a go at ruining another American Master, whereas I love what she does with them. I've loved what she's done with Tennessee Williams, adored what she did with Cabaret. I like the freshness of her approach, and also the way that she tends really seriously to look at the women characters and how they work. And that really matters in Moon for the Misbegotten, because its central female character, Josie, is essentially the town tramp. She's a woman with a ruined reputation. And there are great difficulties, I think, around the way that the part is written. So it will be really interesting to see how Rebecca Frecknell and Ruth Wilson tackle it. I always feel the same thing. I'm absolutely convinced that I will be riveted by what she does.
I think that Rebecca Frecknell's New York status was bolstered by some fairly solid reviews for her production of A Streetcar Named Desire, because that ran at BAM earlier this spring. So fingers crossed, the star is on the rise for her. I think, like you said, some of the notices for her production of Cabaret, when that opened with Eddie Redmayne and Gail Rankin, were slightly less unanimously glorious compared to how they were in the West End. The one thing I was hoping that they would do for Moon for the Misbegotten is do a time-specific version, because that's what they're doing somewhere in America. They're starting the show at 4 a.m. to run right, as it does in the actual text, start at 4 a.m. So in a similar vein to the RSC's production of 448 Psychosis, maybe this is the year that we see a lot of 4 a.m. stagings, or maybe time-specific staging should be more of a thing.
You just want that because your time clock is all out of the way being a new father. I mean, my time clock has always been all out of the way. But yeah, I feel that that's why you want it. But yeah, I'd love to see that, a time-specific staging that, because you do go from that point to morning. And yeah, be good. It would be good. I don't think there's any intention of doing that, but it would be interesting. And actually, you're mentioning 448 Psychosis, that's the other sort of red letter in my diary. That is at the Royal Court, coming back with the original cast. And as I've said before on this conversation, I think the most surprisingly significant play, a play that people thought was an afterthought in Sarah Kane's career, has become, I think, a deeply, deeply significant play in terms of how it sums up anxiety in our age. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
I was looking back on our 2025 preview that we did a few months ago, just after New Year's Day, to see which shows we'd spoken about then and then which ones have been announced since. And what's striking is that almost every single show that I'm now very excited about has been announced in the intervening 4 months that we had no idea was coming. So my next example of that is a new play by James Graham, which is always a case for excitement. The man can seemingly do no wrong at the moment, which is great for UK theatre and UK TV as well. And this year he is penning a brand new play about the 2008 financial crash and the Royal Bank of Scotland, and for some ahistorical reason, Adam Smith, who will be played by Brian Cox in this new production that's opening at Dundee Rep in previews and then playing in Edinburgh for the first portion of August, part of the International Festival. Huge new writing there in terms of James Graham, Brian Cox, a subject matter that really still defines everything that is modern society, really. I think we're living in the after effects of that 2008 crash in ways that probably still won't be computed for another few decades. Yeah,
and I think Adam Smith is appearing as the start of global capitalism. I mean, I think it's a discussion of capitalism, which is such a huge subject for a play. James talks about it a little bit on a previous podcast, which call your attention to, but it is undoubtedly one of the exciting high points of the year. And brilliant National Theatre of Scotland, I love they've produced such good writing, and I love their commitment to new writing and how they do mount these big, surprising, ambitious plays.
It's also starring Sandy Grierson, who I'm a huge fan of. I've seen him in a lot of productions. He's playing Fred the Shred Goodwin, which is probably never a character that you'd assume that you get the chance to play on stage. And knowing James Graham, it's probably going to go in directions that we currently cannot predict. So yes, fingers crossed that's going to be a high point for the summer.
I'm also heading outside London for my third choice. We agreed we'd have 3 plays each, then we're going to do a little roundup at the end.
Yes.
So I am going to struggle my way onto a train to Stratford, and I'd just like to point out I am really struggling with trains to Stratford again. But I'm always excited when I get there, and I'm really excited about Yale Farber directing The Winter's Tale, starring Bertie Carvel as Leontes and Madeline Appiah as Hermione. I love The Winter's Tale partly because I think it was my father's favourite play, and I've again discussed on this podcast before that my father had this slightly weird view of Shakespeare that he shouldn't ever be performed because directors always interfered between my father's platonic view of what he wanted to see on stage and what he actually saw. I managed to resist that, but it has stuck with me as a play. I think it is a difficult, intractable play, but it is full of wonderful poetry and full of hope, which I think is we all need a bit of hope at the moment. And it is a play where terrible things happen. People behave in appalling ways, but unlike in Othello, you are allowed a happy ending, or maybe not, because as I've grown older, I've started to wonder how happy that ending of Winter's Tale is. And I feel that Bertie Carvel is perfect casting for Leontes because he's incredibly good, as he's shown on TV in Dr. Foster, at being both plausible and charming and psychopathic. And there is both those elements in Leontes. So I think it'd be great. And I think Farber is great. I love the way that she looks differently at things. Again, like Rebecca Fretner, you know, I think this generation of women turning their attention to Shakespeare is yielding molten scholarship on stage. And I felt with her Macbeth that by thinking really hard about the position of Lady Macbeth, she was so altering how you saw the play and how you saw the characters. So that's my next one. I'm really very excited about that. And that's on at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre from the 12th of July.
This feels like a very natural opportunity to plug our previous episode of the WhatsOnStage podcast, where James McArdle, who starred in the aforementioned production of Macbeth, waxed lyrical about how wonderful Yael Farber was as a director. Her take on King Lear at the Almeida was also a huge winner. I know you're a big fan of that.
Yeah.
And Danny Sapani won the Critic Circle award for his performance as Lear. And it kind of reminds me of the conversations that were had by the RSC's co-artistic directors Daniel Evans and Tamara Harvey about how they really let the directors go in their own direction, I guess, in terms of where they want to take various Shakespeare plays. And I feel as though it gives their programming a sense of intention and also variety. You know, look, right now, I think by the time this podcast comes out, the version of Hamlet with songs by Radiohead will have opened at the Aviva Studios in Manchester before that transfers to Stratford. So we're really seeing a fantastic amount of programming coming from the RSC, which is starting to sound like a bit of a refrain on this podcast that we're raving about the RSC, but they are literally doing incredible work for reviving Shakespeare and showing just the incredible multifaceted way in which Shakespeare can be placed on our stages, not just in Stratford, but beyond. I think they've got like 7 shows in London in 2025 at the current count, and I'm sure that there might be more. I think there might be even a couple more announced soon as well.
We must move on because there's a lot more to talk about. What's your third? What was your third?
So
choice?
My third pick, I'm also staying out of London, as I love to do in the summer, and going to the Watermill in Newbury because I cannot resist a little dose of Andrew Lloyd Webber for the summer. And although we've spoken at length how much we love Jamie Lloyd's production of Evita, and that's definitely one that we'd give an honourable mention to as being one of our anticipated shows, which is going to the London Palladium, I'm thinking a lot more intimate with director Paul Hart's new staging of Jesus Christ Superstar, which is being done in the very cosy confines of the Watermill. It's a 200-seat venue for those that haven't been, but punches well above its weight on the international circuit in terms of the productions it puts on. And this production of Jesus Christ Superstar is said to occupy not only the venue itself, but also bleed out into the grounds around the Watermill. So very intrigued to see how they stage it. And also just from a orchestration and musical perspective, how will the actor-musician thing work with this production of Jesus Christ Superstar? Because Andrew Lloyd Webber talks often about being very protective over the way in which his music sounds and the way in which he wants it to be heard. So if you take something like Cats the Jellicle Ball, whilst it's an incredibly iconoclastic staging, the music itself is very much done as any other production of Cats is. That really hasn't been changed at all. So will we hear a more stripped back, pared back version of Jesus Christ Superstar, or will it be a very full-blooded version of that show still? And if it is the former, how does that sound? What changes? How does an intimate space change the nature of this production when you don't have the big spectacle or the glitz and the glamour of something like a production that was seen at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre now, 7 or 8 years ago? Gosh, longer, 9 years ago. Wow, this is a long time. So how will that intimate space change the relationship between Jesus and Judas? How will it alter our perception of the characters, or maybe the jealousy that Judas feels towards Jesus and Mary will become a lot more pronounced? And I just feel like it's a really wonderful scene to play with a show like that in a really cozy setting. I also wanted to mention Anjali Mira, who was the choreographer, and she used to be a dancer in New Adventures from 1999 onwards, and has now sort of moved into choreography. One of the sort of like very exciting choreographers. I think she's going to do something really interesting with that show because there's a lot you can do choreography wise there as well.
Yeah. A lot of the dancers from New Adventures have moved in choreography. It's an interesting thing about how they're encouraged to think, actually, I think, is they move out. Musicals, good summer for musicals, isn't it? There's, in no particular order, there's London Road coming back to the National. There's Fiddler on the Roof coming to the Barbican, which we've talked about at length. There's Hercules is the big one, isn't it? Coming in, Disney's latest. Coming into the...
Drury Lane, yes. We've also got Sing Street, which love the film Sing Street, so that's being adapted into a musical. And very lovely to see Theatr Clwyd back in action following some major refurbishment. So that's opening with a new production of Jonathan Larson's three-hander musical Tick Tick Boom, which was recently turned into an incredible film. It came to Netflix during COVID and it was a very busy time, so I feel like it never got the full celebration it deserved, but go to Netflix and watch that if you want. It's Andrew Garfield, who apparently might be coming back to the stage at some point soon, but you didn't hear that from me.
Exciting.
What other things are on your honourable mention list?
No, as you know, so much that I said I just couldn't cope, really. But Till the Stars Come Down, another transfer from the National Theatre. Beth Steele's incredibly funny, clever drama set at a summer wedding, so it worked brilliantly, I think, for the time of year. My theory about Beth Steele is that she really is one of the very best writers today, and she writes such sinewy dialogue and gets the nub of things in a way. I always feel when I'm in a theatre with her that I know the people she's writing about, and I absolutely know where I am. And I've heard these women, discuss the need to lose 3 stone by taking a poo to fit into a bridesmaid's dress. The jokes are very sharp and on the money, and so is her sense of how people suffer and how love is misplaced. And I adored that play, so I'm really glad that's getting an extra life. So that's my main honourable mention.
And the casting was announced for that earlier this week, and it's got some lovely people in it, like Ashton Loftus. And for anyone who is a fan of The White Lotus, the cast also includes Julian Kostov, who's playing the groom Marek, who's a very pivotal role for those who know the play. So White Lotus fans, head to the Haymarket this summer for
So that's. I mean, I am excited about huge amounts coming up, but I think those are the things I am most excited about.
Yeah, it's a nice sort of solid year. Again, I think we spoke about this last year, how theatre really in the last 18 months or so has found its feet now, I think, in terms of the commercial sector hitting a stride post-pandemic. Yeah. And, you're looking at a lot of venues sitting in rude health, very full programming. How that then continues in the future is going to be obviously up for debate, and there's always a storm cloud or two on a horizon, but I think in the meantime what we can do is just celebrate what's in front of us.
And I thought of something else I wanted to mention, which is my mind's gone blank, but intimate apparel coming.
Yes,
Lynn Nottage. Years ago I interviewed Lynn Nottage, who I loved talking to. She was a brilliant person to interview, and she talked about intimate apparel, which was I hadn't seen at that point, and she whetted my appetite so much to see it. It's based on the history of her own family and about a tailor in Harlem, and Samira Wiley from Orange is the New Black is starring in it, and so that's my other great excitement, and I've waited a long time to see that, so that would be great.
The new artistic director of the Donmar Warehouse was Timothy Sheeder, who started his tenure in September with The Fear of 13. And since then, it's pretty much been a very solid season. I think all but maybe one of the shows has been incredibly well received. And I think the intimate apparel might continue that streak. I'm very excited to see what his second season now looks like, because he's clearly shown that he loves programming that space and has a very specific vision for it. So I think we were in for some real treats come the rest of 2025, and I'm sure we'll regroup on those probably in August or something. There's a wealth of excitement as always. And hopefully I'm actually going to see some theatre. I think
Yes, you'll be able to get out.
Reuniting. Yeah,
get
I haven't
babysitters.
actually seen a show since... the last time I went to the theatre was Much Ado About Nothing at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. So as editor-in-chief of WhatsOnStage, to have not seen any theatre in 3 months feels like negligence, really. I mean, obviously, parenting has sort of occupied all my time.
Parenting's important. Theatre's important, but parenting's important too. But we are both going to see the Stephen Sondheim.
We're having a time.
We're having an outing this week. So we will report on that and much else next week in our episode of the WhatsOnStage podcast. And for now, it's time to say goodbye from me, Sarah Crompton.
And a goodbye from me, Alex Wood. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment and rate us wherever you can. We'll be back with regular programming every Friday. So make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode.